Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Payton Haws. If you're new here, I am an ex-Mormon that has seemingly become my niche on this channel. This is my husband, Colin. He makes an appearance very often. I drag him into my videos. It's a good time. I realized researching on a lot of other ex-Mormon platforms that videos talking about Mormon missions seem to do really well. So I was like, hey, I know someone who served a Mormon mission, my husband. So I'm like, will you do a video with me and I could ask you questions about it? And then I asked ChatGPT to write out a bunch of questions for me, and then it felt super weird and difficult. And so we're like, let's just wing it. Let's just talk about his mission, his experience, all of that. So yeah, that's what we're going to do today. Do you have anything you want to add for like an introduction or anything you want to say about yourself?
No.
Okay, so first things first, something that I know I wanted to mention regarding your mission was the fact that, well, actually, no, we should first talk about what a Mormon mission is for people who are probably watching who may have never been on a mission and are just curious about it. Maybe you can explain what it is.
Yeah, so a mission is typically 2 years for men and 18 months for women. And you essentially, like, once you are old enough, the ages now is 18 for men, 19 for women. Once you're old enough, you can essentially submit papers, which is really just like filling out a bunch of paperwork showing that you're ready to go on a mission. There's like, you do a bunch of like interviews with like your bishop and stake president. And then you also do like some medical things, like you have to like physically be able to serve. Once you do that, then the church gives you a calling or essentially assigns you to a certain mission around the world. And you go and you teach the LDS gospel for that period of time. And yeah, it's an overview. Anything you want to add?
Do you know, so why did you feel that it was important to fill out mission papers in the first place?
Well, a mission is taught as like a very important thing, especially for young men from a pretty young age in the church. I feel like I couldn't tell you exactly like the first, like how young I was when I first started learning about it, but very much so through young men's. By the time I was like 12, leading up to when I was 18 and old enough to go, like that's very much a focus of like priesthood meetings and stuff, is just making sure that you're ready and able and worthy to go is a big thing. And so I always caught on to that and knew, just kind of like as a part of me knew that like that's what was going to happen when I turned 18. So
yeah. And from like a female's perspective, being raised in the church, it's also taught from a very young age that when you get older, you'll marry a returned missionary and be sealed with him in the temple and, you know, have kids, and that's how you obtain eternal life. And it's, even though technically it's not taught that you have to go on a mission to make it to the celestial kingdom of the church, which is taught as being the highest degree of heaven, the most appealing, the one everybody wants to go to, because the Mormon church believes in like 3 heavens, and so that's the best one. But the 2 lower degrees aren't really talked about that much. Everyone just talks about the celestial kingdom. Yeah, you don't have to go on a mission to make it to that degree of heaven, but I did notice that it was taught to men. I had 2 brothers growing up, and I still have 2 brothers. I'm not saying I had them, but yeah, I know it was taught to them, and even in our household, you know, when you go on a mission and stuff.
yeah,
and then for
stuff
me,
like that.
it was like when you marry a returned missionary and stuff. And
Yeah,
I knew, regardless of the fact that you didn't serve your full 2 years, which we'll talk about later, that my mom still would likely have approved, just because you served the mission in general, because I think to her that was just a big determining factor of like just like having a worthy priesthood holder who is, doing the things that they're supposed to in the church. And I think then everything else becomes like a cherry on top, like how you treat your mother and how you treat me and how you're just overly, in general, a kind human being. And all these things were just like cherries on top, but like that original basis like was really important to her. And I remember communicating with her that I didn't feel that was very important. Like, would I like that? I think so. I think in my mind I felt like that was a determining factor of where it was like, you likely are, an active, like worthy priesthood holder. But to me, I didn't feel like someone had to do that. I understood why that would be a really hard thing and why somebody might not want to do that. And so it wasn't a huge thing for me.
I mean, it definitely makes sense why they would want you to do that. I mean, that would essentially mean finding somebody that shares your same belief system. And there's a lot of good characteristics and things that you learn while you're on a mission, which I'm sure we'll get into, that I think are just generally good to have life skill wise and experience wise. But yeah.
Okay, so what did putting your papers in, because I feel like that's kind of the wording people use, is, I put my papers in, I worked on my papers. What did that process look like?
Yes, I don't remember a whole lot of the specifics about the process. I know it took probably, like 3 or 4 months from the time that I decided this is what I wanted to do until the papers were finished and submitted. Really, it's just, I remember there was like a part that I had to fill out that was like kind of my background, like if I had studied any foreign languages, just kind of like trying to figure out more information about me. And then there's like doctor's appointments you have to do. I had to get my wisdom teeth out. And then there's just a few interviews with like your bishop and then your stake president, just to kind of make sure you're staying on the right track. And then once they're done, you submit them to the church. You submit them with a photo too. And then there's like a few weeks of turnaround time. And then eventually you get your calling in the mail, which is the paperwork that tells you where you're going to go.
So you mentioned that you do a few interviews with your bishop to make sure that you're staying on the right track. Do you recall what kind of questions were asked, or if there was anything in specific that might be, like a red flag or a concern where they're like, maybe he's not quite ready to go out? What kind of things were they looking for?
Yeah, it's really anybody that's done a temple recommend interview. It's basically that. It's almost like less formal. It's more just like the bishop is trying to like figure out what's going on in your life and, make sure that like it's more of like a preemptive thing to make sure that like there's nothing that like you should talk about or clear up before you go that you haven't. But like anybody that's done a temple recommend interview, men and women do those, you'll be familiar with what they talk about. They're just making sure that there's nothing like obviously wrong or serious that you need to clear up before you go.
I've heard mixed things from different people about whether or not viewing pornography impacted their ability to go on a mission or not. Do you know if they had did they specifically ask anything about that? Or
yeah, but I think that's a question that pretty much every youth gets asked anytime they do a temple recommend interview now. I don't think it's any different than that. I think they're just aware that pornography is very common and kids have easy access to it, and so it's kind of something that they ask everybody, I think, at this point.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they do ask, and that was something that I was asked. They essentially just ask, do you have like a problem with pornography, just to get a sense, like, is that something we need to work on before you go?
I'm kind of thinking about a story you brought up to me once, and you can tell me if it doesn't apply or not, but didn't you have like someone in some type of interview ask you very specifically if you knew how to make something? Was that involved with your mission stuff?
So
or what?
that was involved with my mission stuff. So there's an interview you do with your bishop before you leave on your mission. And it's just like the temple recommend interviews, but it's a little bit more in detail and a little more like, I don't know if it's supposed to be, but that's how my bishop treated it. And so they kind of go more specific into some of the questions. And one of them is the word of wisdom. And at the time in the news, bath salts were becoming like, there was news stories about people just doing crazy things on bath salts. Like some guy ate another guy's face while he was on bath salts. Anyways, so it seemed like maybe it was like becoming something. Now, mind you, I had never thought about doing, wanted to do any type of drug ever in my life at this point.
Was he joking or was he like,
no, he was serious. He
like...
was serious. It wasn't a joking like tone or anything. I think it's because it was like such a fixation in like the news and stuff at the time that he just like felt like it was important. Anyways, he asked if I had ever done anything like bath salts, and I said no, obviously, because I hadn't. And then he clarified and asked if I knew how they were made or what they were. Like maybe he was thinking that like maybe I didn't know if I had done them because I didn't know what they were or something. I don't know what his justification was. But anyways, I said no, and then he goes on and explains that like how they're made. And mind you, I don't even know if he was accurate about it, but just talked about like melting down bath salts and turning it into a drug somehow. And I was like, none of this seems applicable.
Epsom salt? Or is
I don't know what kind of, I don't know what they're using or what they were using. But I was like, yeah, that's no, still not me. I'm not doing that. So
at what point through all of this did you find out that your mom got sick?
Oh, man, I should have talked to her and clarified the timeline. I believe so. I submitted my papers sometime like late fall of 2013, which is the year I graduated high school. And then my mission call came right around Thanksgiving. Now, she either told me a few days before or a few days after, but it was like the week of me opening my call. It might have been the night before or the night after. I can't remember that I actually opened my call that I found out that she was sick. And so she had breast cancer and she had just found out and was telling everybody, but they told me around that time that I was opening my call.
So do you remember finding out and then thinking like, I'm about to leave on my mission, and what was going through your head?
Yeah, and I've always had problems with like anxiety, and so I think there was it was one of those things that can kind of elevate that and kind of make that more dramatic. But at the same time, I was still very much so in the frame of mind of like, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. Like, it wasn't as if like I heard the news and was like, okay, well, I'm not going then. It wasn't that way. But there was like some fear of like, well, I don't know, like, I didn't understand like how serious a certain diagnosis was with cancer at that point, like what it meant, what the outlook was for it. I just knew that like it sounded serious, and so I was kind of worried about just her health in general. But yeah.
Did she ever say anything to you that you remember in regards to her diagnosis and you leaving?
I just remember her telling me not to worry about her, that like she was going to be all right, and that like I was still fine and ready to go on a mission. Like she basically wanted me to make sure that like I wasn't just like focused and worried about her to the point where like I didn't want to go or anything. She was just reassuring me that like she was okay and that like it was going to be a fine thing to go still.
That sounds like her.
Yeah.
So when you went to open your mission call, what was that like? Did you have a bunch of people over? How was that?
Yeah, so that's pretty common in the church. Typically, like a mission call opening, they usually do like a gathering of family and friends, people from the ward, that sort of thing. So that's what it was. I had a couple of my friends from high school there, and then all of our family was there. We had some of our extended family showing up, and it's just kind of like a big like party. And then everybody waits, and then you open your big white envelope with your calling in it, and you read it off. And that's where people figure out where you're going. So yeah, it was just a nice big party.
So I've seen a lot of people when they open their mission calls, they put like another piece of paper over their call, and they like slowly move the paper down so you don't like read ahead. You didn't do that?
I don't think I did that. I'm pretty sure I just pulled it right out and read it.
Did you see where you were going before you read it out loud?
I don't think so. I think I just read through it line by line.
Tell everyone where you went.
So I was called to the Chile Concepcion South Mission, which Chile is a really long country. That was pretty far south. And yeah, I remember reading that, and I was excited because it was Spanish speaking. And
that didn't make you nervous?
I mean, a little bit, but I had taken Spanish in high school, and like I didn't take it all that seriously when I was in high school, but
you knew some stuff.
I knew enough about the language to know that like, oh, this could be fun to like get out there and learn Spanish. So
I like when you speak Spanish, or if I ask like on TV if you know what someone said, and you'll tell me, and I'm just like,
I'm not very good at it these days.
I think you are, but I think that you are nervous to speak it because you think, what if it sounds stupid? Yeah. And so you would just rather not.
Yeah, and what if somebody that's good at it is like, that doesn't make any sense.
But another thing I was going to mention is you had a conversation with my uncle at one point and found out he served the same mission, right? Mm-hmm. Was it also south?
I can't remember. He might have said that it was all one mission when he went out, and then they ended up splitting it at some point, because a lot of missions were like that. There were a lot of missions where you just got called to that city and country. And then as the church has grown and there's more and more missionaries being sent out, a lot of the missions have been split into like, you know, this city north and this city south, you know. So I don't know if it was the same in that sense, but he went to the same place.
Yeah. So I don't know if he mentioned this to you, but he told me that he absolutely despises beans. And that's like basically all he got everywhere he went was beans. And he's like, I just learned how to politely hork him down, and it was disgusting the whole time. People said I get used to it. I didn't. I hate beans. That's really funny. I thought that was funny. You liked the food, right?
Yeah, the food was good. It wasn't like the stereotypical like South American food that like I had heard a lot of people talk about. But I also heard that Chile was heavily influenced by like Europe, and so a lot of the food was different than what you would expect from South America. So we had some like interesting stuff. I remember one time we got fed this pasta dish, and it was like, think about like pasta salad, and then they served like over easy eggs over it, which was kind of weird.
I love over easy.
But it was good.
Was it cold or hot?
No, it was hot. It was like a warm pasta.
My dad used to make pasta salad. He'd make it fresh, so it would be warm, but he would store it in the fridge, and then when we would have like leftovers for dinner at some point in the week, we would have it cold, and it was good both ways. So you get called. How soon after that do you go out? Was it pretty quickly after you read your call?
Yeah, so this is something that can vary for different people too. Like some people open their call and then they have 4 months still that they have to wait. I opened mine very end of November, and I was leaving January 15th. I think some missions, they need more time because there's a lot of like prep work for like visas and stuff. All I had to do, I had to get a passport, and then I had to get some vaccinations that were specific to where I was going, and then get my suits and like my missionary clothing, but that was about it.
Would you be okay with it if we found some of your mission photos and put them on the screen to show what you were?
Gosh, yeah, we can do that.
He was a lot, at least from pictures that I've seen, you were a lot smaller at that age.
Yeah.
You were like shorter and skinnier and
a little bit. Definitely skinnier.
now you're taller and you're buff. Why are you so uncomfortable with me complimenting you?
I don't know.
So tell me what the MTC was like and which one did you go to?
Oh, we did skip over something that might be interesting to add,
Okay.
just as a cool story. So a lot of my experience with my mission was very positive, by the way, like most of it. I feel like there was like some aftermath stuff that was hard, but I want to share like some of the good stories and stuff leading up to it. So obviously after my mom was diagnosed and everything, my parents were like really busy and stuff, like figuring that out. Now they're trying to like figure out getting me out the door on my mission and all that. And my older sister was on a mission at this point already. And so there was a lot going on. And one day my mom got a call from like a clothing store, saying that somebody had offered to buy my missionary suits for me. So all I had to do was go in, pick which ones I wanted, and they would like fit me and stuff and get them tailored and stuff. And then they didn't have to buy them or anything. They were already paid for.
So it's like maybe of a family friend or somebody just like anonymously knew that your mom had just gotten sick and that you had to go out and that there was another sibling that's out and all this stuff and just wanted
to help and offer. Yeah. And then I had a really good friend of mine bought my shoes for my mission. He bought me 2 very nice pairs of dress shoes.
I think I know who it is. I think you told me.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of people that like just stepped up from like the ward or our neighborhood, just that wanted to help get me out there. So that was super awesome.
Yeah, it's really sweet. So which missionary training center did you get sent to?
Mexico City. So a lot of the South American missionaries were going to the Mexico City MTC at that point. It was new. It's a large place. And so not all of them were going there because they still had quite a few in Provo, but it was great. I mean, I had a really good experience there. I remember, so we flew from Salt Lake to Phoenix, and we had a connecting flight in Phoenix that took us to Mexico City. But I remember both planes had so many missionaries on them.
Wow.
Both from Salt Lake to Phoenix and then from Phoenix to Mexico City. And then remember when we got to the airport in Mexico City, we all got off the plane and we're all like kind of huddled together. And then somebody like came and found us all and took us to some buses that were taking us to the place. And I just remember the drive from the airport to the MTC was the most chaotic thing I've ever seen in my entire life, because it's like driving on like the world's busiest streets and it's just complete chaos. It was like, it seemed like a road that should have like 3 lanes of traffic at most, and there was like 5 lanes, and everybody seemingly seems like they're going to get in a wreck every 5 seconds. So that was like my first like cultural thing of like, this is a huge city and this is like,
why are the lanes so like
like it just a completely different like driving scenario and style to what I had seen growing up. So like just right off the plane and onto the bus, I realized that like this was a completely different place.
So in America, people drive on like the left side, and I know in like a lot of European places they drive on the right side, like the driver's thing. And also in America, you kind of stay to the right often when you're driving, and it's flipped. In Europe, you stay kind of to the left, and it's this whole thing. What was it like in South America?
You know, it was the same.
As here?
I'm pretty sure we were driving on the right side the whole time. But
so the driver's on the left, and then you... Because the driver's seat is on the left.
Driver's seat's on the left, and you keep to the right. Same thing as here.
That was just like a random thought I had I was curious about. But yeah, I've heard a lot of fun stories from you about the MTC, just like little things here and there. How long did you stay there? Just like tell us about how that...
Yeah, it was either 6 or 8 weeks. I want to say it was 6 weeks that I was there. But so you show up There's like a big preliminary meeting with all the new missionaries that get there. You figure out who your companion is for the MTC. When you're on a mission, you have a companion that you're basically with 24/7. It's like the person you're teaching with and living with and everything. So I lucked out. I got an amazing companion. He was super, super helpful with everything that I was like going through in the MTC, which we can talk about a little bit more. And we're still friends to this day. We still, keep in touch and have done some things post mission just to hang out and go hiking or whatever. So, but you figure out who your companion is going to be. And then basically the next day you're like on your schedule, like getting into it. And go ahead.
What kind of rules did you have to follow while you were there?
It's all the rules that any missionary has talked about or whatnot, but you're with your companion 24/7 basically, unless you're like showering or in the bathroom. It's basically like the only time. Like everything else,
you have to be able to see them, right? Unless they're in the bathroom.
Yeah, and so you basically wake up and you have the same schedule. So I remember we had like classes on like the lessons, and then we would have time for language study, and there was time dedicated for like personal study, companionship study. There was time for like exercise, which was really cool there. They had like a nice gym and like a sports gym for like volleyball, basketball. Lots of soccer fields, areas to play soccer, which was fun. There was firesides pretty often. You do them.
You say what a fireside is?
It's just everybody gathers in like a big auditorium, and there's a speaker talking about some gospel related or mission related thing.
It's like a big church meeting kind of, but it's not dedicated to like some Sunday service or worship or something like that. It's just kind of like a lesson in church, but it's like a lot more people gathered for it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then on Sundays looked pretty normal. I mean, you had church just like you had every Sunday before you went on your mission, where they would, have speakers and pass the sacrament and all that. Yeah. I don't know if there's like any specifics that you want me to dive into.
TV, movies, music.
None of that. Basically,
You have church music.
You had like church music. I remember. So we were like in the middle of like a pretty busy spot within Mexico City. And so sometimes we would hear like music from outside the MTC walls just blasting. And that was always nice.
That was always nice.
I remember one time we heard somebody blasting Katy Perry like right outside of the MTC.
Oh, you were a big Katy Perry fan.
Yeah. Yes, this is true. And
who was some of your favorite music at the time that you couldn't listen to?
I really liked the Killers. I still liked quite a bit of like country music at that point. But basically any of the music that I did like, I couldn't listen to. Like they would sometimes play like church music in certain instances, but that was about it. And I know that like once you got to the mission field, like your mission president could essentially like approve or not approve certain music. Like you could ask about it basically. Mm-hmm. I never cared enough to do that, but maybe if I was out for longer, maybe I would have gotten to that point. But yeah, so there wasn't any of that. But like I remember one time when we heard that music playing outside, one of the missionaries was like, the tender mercies. And it's just like, it was funny to like be like so sheltered in the sense that something playing outside of the MTC walls like that was such a big deal. But I do remember that.
What kind of stuff did you eat?
Oh, we had good food. We had really good food. There was a day each week that was like basically the Costco day where they would bring in Costco pizza. I remember that. And they would also do those chicken bake things from Costco. Those were really good.
That's crazy.
But then the rest of the time it was like normal, I guess just like normal Mexican food. And I remember with most meals, they would also serve fresh corn tortillas. And so I would take a big old stack of those things and fuel up on those.
Just eat a bunch of tortillas?
I freaking love corn tortillas, especially when like fresh corn tortillas. So good.
Yeah, I've been interested in making tortillas from scratch, like getting like a tortilla press and doing it. And it looks really hard and really like so much easier to go buy a bag of tortillas, but it looks yummy.
I remember for breakfast, they always had like a cereal bar, and they had corn pops, which I freaking love corn pops. I would load up on those.
I was gonna ask you about cereal. I know you talked about having a lot of cereal there.
They always had a fridge for breakfast too that had like drinkable yogurt. It had like chocolate milk and strawberry milk. Had like a bunch of like flavored good breakfast drinks. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't get to breakfast on time or early, everything was basically gone. So, because people would go in there, they would load up on it.
Freaking rude.
Anyways, another thing that we would do is they had like stuff to make sandwiches. Mm-hmm. So they had like peanut butter and Nutella, all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's another thing I know you specifically mentioned something about Nutella and just like loaves of bread. And I was like, I was going to ask you about that.
What we would do sometimes so that we would have snacks throughout the day.
You're a snack.
Is we would open a whole loaf of bread, okay? Make a bunch of sandwiches, put the sandwiches together, stack them back into the bread loaf bag, and just carry them around with us. And then we had sandwiches all day long.
That's what you told me. I was trying to remember what the story was.
Yeah, so
that's insane.
There was no shortage of food. We ate really, really well.
It's better than what we have here usually.
And you get like a stipend as a missionary, like a certain amount of money per month.
And that's from like what you pay to go on a mission, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Right? I mean, I'm pretty sure the stipend, they might adjust it like depending on what country you're in.
Yeah, I've heard that. But depending on like the cost of things on where you're at. But I've heard, well, maybe this applies more to when you're in the mission field, but I've heard from a lot of people that the amount of money you get, you cannot live off of that, like food-wise, and that's why you really lean into like going to ward members' houses to get food.
Yeah, I would say like if I was having to feed myself just on that, then that would be a problem. So, I mean, maybe some missionaries do experience that depending on what mission they're in, but we also had so many people, like members and stuff down there volunteering to like feed us that I never noticed that. Yeah. Like the only time we would use our money to feed ourselves, like if we had to go like buy like breakfast stuff and you know, like certain, like it was for anything. It was like if I had to buy like hygiene stuff or whatever, I had to just go out and spend that money. But I do remember in the MTC, like you still are getting that stipend. Sorry, I keep leaning back. You're still getting that stipend, but in the MTC, like all of your food is covered. You don't really have a lot of stuff for it, but they had a store there where you could buy all kinds of things. You could buy like
souvenirs, maybe.
Yeah, you could buy like fancy like vials for like your consecrated oil. You could buy
a whole nother topic.
That's a whole nother topic, but basically there's oil that you use when you give somebody a blessing in the church. And it's common for like priesthood holders to carry it around on their keychain in like a little vial. So they sold those there. They sold like different like church books and artwork and stuff. But they also had a whole food and candy section. So this is where we really loaded up because they had the Arizona canned drinks and they had the watermelon flavor. So we would go in there.
So much.
So much. We go in and we would load up on those. And then they had I remember they had a ton of different types of candy, but they had specifically the Airhead Extremes, the rainbow Airhead things.
Those are good. The full length ones, or were they the bit?
They were the full length ones in like these packages.
I don't know if the bites were out at that point.
We would load up on those too.
Those are good. If I drink an Arizona right now, so I have reactive hypoglycemia, so if I were to drink one of those, my blood sugar would probably drop so low I'd fall asleep.
That would not be good.
I have no energy. That's why, like, I would be that person, like, ordering a burger and fries and stuff, and then making my drink diet, and everyone's like, oh, that's going to make it so much better. I'm like, no, it's more about just how it makes me feel. Not... Anyway, I don't know if this is it. I know I thought about this at one point, but you were talking about having a lot of members who would feed you guys for dinner and stuff like that. I always felt sorry for missionaries who were called into singles wards and people who are like 18, 19 years old and also don't have money to hardly feed themselves. We'd have the missionaries come over to my house in a singles ward, and my best friend would just like come over and we would both try and pitch in. And there was one time we actually like made food, but a lot of times we just get like Little Caesars pizza because it was like the cheapest thing to get like the most amount of food. And I'm like, these poor missionaries are basically living off of pizza and like cheap stuff that like these young 18, 19-year-olds can afford.
I can guarantee they probably didn't care either.
I don't even know.
They probably just liked that, you know, they were getting fed without having to use their own money and feed themselves.
Well, I know that they really struggled to get people willing to feed them.
Yeah.
My best friend and I would have them come over at least once a week because they didn't have enough people to feed them. And I was like barely making any money. I was also going to friends' houses to eat dinner.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah. No, we felt very lucky. We always got like delicious home cooked stuff most of the time.
So while you were in the MTC, do you feel like there was a big diverse group of people there, or do you feel like were there people there who like already spoke Spanish?
Yeah.
Were there people there who weren't doing Spanish speaking, were like doing English in South America? Or
Yeah, so we
doing English? What am I saying?
There was a lot of missionaries that were from South America that were in that training center too. Like they were native Spanish speakers from countries in South America.
Okay.
And so there was like a good mix. Usually most of the people that came from the US had a companion that was also from the US. I don't know like why they did that intentionally. Like maybe it's just like easier to be able to adjust because you have somebody that also speaks English and like, you know, so yeah, there was a pretty big group. And then the missionaries from the US, like they were from all over. I mean, we had a bunch from Texas, Utah, Colorado.
Did you get some
bunch from Arizona.
Accents from Texas? Do you remember? Southern accents?
No, my companion in the MTC was from there, and I honestly, if he tried, he can do like a pretty like stereotypical Texas accent, but it didn't ever like come out normally like he had something, you know.
Yeah, I feel like I'm wondering if the Texan like accent is starting to fade with how many people move there from different places. It feels like you don't really hear that southern drawl that much. Not as much anyway, but you'll still hear the kind of the same types of sayings and y'all and all that kind of stuff. But that's random. All right, so you're done at the Missionary Training Center. They've been teaching you Spanish and feeding you really well and all of this stuff, and you're making friends, and now you're ready to go out into what's called the mission field. Now you're in, you know, Chile, Concepcion, South. Am I saying that right? Mm-hmm. Did you experience any type of cultural shocks while you were out there, or what were you feeling? What did you experience?
Okay, yeah, so we had to drive through the crazy city again in Mexico City to leave the MTC. And keep in mind, like, the first time when they drove us from the airport to the MTC, we only left the MTC grounds once in between that time. That was to go to the Temple and Visitor Center in Mexico City. So we were very sheltered there the whole time. So we had to go to the airport, flew from that airport to Santiago, which was 7-8 hours, something like that, pretty far flight. And then there's a group of us in that Santiago airport that had flown from the MTC together, because a lot of us were going to missions in Chile. But there was 2 missions specifically that was like the majority of the missionaries that we were with. So then we had to each get on different flights from there that were going to the different missions. Our next flight was like an hour or something. It wasn't too bad. It's from Santiago to Concepcion airport. And then once we got to Concepcion, I just remember that like either the day we got there or the day after, we met with we stayed in a hotel when we first got there. I remember there was like some Holiday Inn basically that we stayed in. And then the next day we met with the mission president. We did like a big dinner at the mission home. And that whole like transition felt pretty normal. But then the next day was when we actually all kind of split off to our missions. and to our areas, I guess I should say. And my area was like a 2 hour bus ride from there to where I was going. And my companion that I had been assigned to, it was his first time training a new missionary. And I just remember like showing up, they helped me get all my stuff off the bus and take it up to our apartment. And like right away, I noticed like it was going to be different because like in the MTC, everything is like provided for you. It's comfortable and all that.
It's fun.
It's fun. And I remember that when we got to the field, our water heater was powered by propane. So you had to buy like a big propane gas tank thing to power your water heater. And theirs had been out. And so it was like only cold showers when I first got there, which was different than the MTC. Like you were very comfortable. Everything that you would ever want or need was there. And so
Except music.
Except music. So I kind of realized right away it was going to be different. It was like, now it's your job as a missionary to make sure that like you're on top of everything and, you know, you're kind of doing your own thing. So right away, I kind of noticed that that was different. And now you're also just kind of submerged in that culture completely. So you're surrounded by people that just speak Spanish. My companion spoke great, perfect, fine English, but everybody that we talked to throughout the day, whether we were knocking doors or, you know, meeting with members, whatever it was, everybody spoke Spanish. And I had kind of that realization of like coming out of the MTC, I felt like I had learned a lot and I was in a comfortable spot. And like actually speaking to people that are native speakers, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, so most of our lessons and stuff, I would sit there like pretty quietly. And then like at the end, I would like bear my testimony in Spanish, like, cause I learned how to do that basically.
Mm-hmm. What kind of stuff would you say in your testimony? Was it very like,
it was
just
like
the standard stuff that everybody says?
Probably. I mean, it was like, you know, when you go to a ward meeting and like an 8-year-old gets up there and bears their testimony.
Yeah, like, you know, the church is true. You know, Joseph Smith, you know, translated the Book of Mormon, founded the church, and
that's like what it
all that
was.
stuff.
It was like a little kid was giving their, because it was like, it was a new language to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like I had to learn
but they
those
knew,
simple
right?
phrases.
Like your companion probably told them that you
they
are barely learning.
Yeah, the investigators would know that like I was completely new to the mission and was still very much so working on my Spanish. So
yeah,
it was out there, it was known. And I'm lucky that I had like a lot of like, you know, supportive companions. So I had my companion that once I got to the mission field was very supportive, very helpful. And we had 2 other missionaries that lived in our same apartment. They did not speak English. They were like trying to like learn words here and there, but they were also like super friendly and helpful with anything that I was trying to learn. So yeah, there definitely was a culture shock and like an adjustment that had to be made. But overall, I still felt like I had a lot of like support and options around me for like, you know, I could ask my companion if I was struggling with something, or I could call the mission president or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I know you kept like a missionary journal. Were you writing in it at this point?
Yeah, I was pretty good at that. That's something that they told us. Like, I had gotten advice leading up to my mission to keep a good journal because like there's going to be stuff from your mission you're going to want to remember. But they also like tell you when you get there that that's like an important thing and something you'll want to do. So I had one that I was keeping. Somebody had given me something that just says missionary journal on the front. And then it just has like a calendar with like numbers. You just like circle what day it is. And I had been writing in that. I wrote on it the day that I got there, and I was pretty good about writing almost every day while I was there.
Yeah. It's in your office right now.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it in there the other day. Do you remember what kind of things you were writing at this point when it's still really fresh and new?
Yeah, so that I should probably backtrack a little bit just because to give the context. So I kind of struggled a little bit with like some anxiety and whatnot in the MTC in regards to like the news that I'd gotten before my mission about my mom's health. I was having a hard time not like dwelling on that and whatnot. And so in the MTC was like asking my companion for help. I had asked for like a priesthood blessing. I had asked just for support from him, and he was great. I mean, he was there for that, and he was always like, he had his own stuff that was going on that he was dealing with. He had like chronic migraines, and like he had a lot of stuff going on while he was there, but he always was providing support and help. So super grateful for that. So like throughout the MTC, you can kind of like see that pop back up. Like I would do pretty well for a week, and then like for another week I was like kind of struggling with it a lot more. Once I got to the mission field, it's like it got so much worse so fast, because I didn't have all the comfort that's provided in the MTC, I guess. Like tons of like food catered to you, available and everything. You don't have to go and like buy it from people that speak a language you're not familiar with. There's all this stuff that is like now this new level of like, okay, now I'm on my own in a different country that I don't understand the language and whatnot. So very quickly in my journal, you can kind of see the anxiety and the depression kind of getting worse, because all that's going on, and I'm starting to like worry about like what's going on at home. And I wasn't getting a lot of like updates about my mom's health or anything. So it wasn't as if like, it was not as if I was getting like worse or worse news about her. It's just like I didn't know what was going on, and I think it was causing a lot of just like fear and anxiety.
So you weren't allowed to have contact with your family at this point.
Well, that's not true. I mean, we did emails. So yeah, each week we would be able to go to the church building and get on the computers there and email our family. That was a weekly thing. On Mondays was our P day or preparation day. So we would have about an hour usually to get on there and email back and forth with family or friends. And yeah, I would mostly just email my mom from there.
Some people would email like girls back home that they were talking to, and like that's like a really common thing. I think I knew girls who had somebody that was on a mission that they would be writing and were wanting to marry them when they came back, and I feel like that was a thing.
Yeah, there was a few mission. I mean, those missionaries you would find out because they would just talk about it on P-Day when they would email back. There was a few of them that were like pretty open, that like they had a girl that was waiting for them to get back or whatever. So that did happen out there. I remember one week on our P-Day, we went up to the main city. So we bussed all the way up to the Concepcion for the week. And we did our emailing there from like an internet cafe. It was just like a bunch of computers. And so I remember doing that. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird in the sense that in the MTC, even though you're still only allowed to talk to your family one day a week, you were on the computers and stuff a lot because you were using those for your learning. Whereas in the actual field, like your only computer time was like an hour a week to send emails out and update people on how things are going.
Were you able to do like phone calls or video chats or hear people's voice or see them or anything?
No, so this changed. I mean, more recently, missionaries can do that. They can call or Skype, like video chat with their family, I think weekly. I think like that's now replaced like what emails was. But for a long time, it was you could email weekly with your family, and then you could do a phone call on Mother's Day and Christmas was the 2 days.
Not Father's Day?
Not Father's Day.
Random.
Yeah, but anyways, so
what about Thanksgiving?
Yeah, Thanksgiving.
What about Halloween?
Not
That's really important.
Yeah, what the heck?
What about your birthday?
Yeah, no.
Like, what if they want to talk to you on your birthday?
On your own birthday, it's too bad.
I just pictured a really pathetic party of like confetti and everyone's sitting there frowning.
Yeah, there really was.
You're like, I didn't get confetti. Yeah. What the heck? Hard, but this explodes. Not explodes, but like I mean confetti. Okay, so you didn't stay for the whole 2 years like most people do.
Yeah.
You probably know I mean, I know you know now, but you might have known at the time as well that there's kind of a stigma around people who come home from their missions early and people kind of raise an eyebrow at that and wonder why, and some people can just be, they just kind of come up with their own conclusions on what happened, and a lot of times people will automatically jump to, you weren't like you were
worthy,
you were doing things
you
that
did
you
something
like,
that caused you to be sent home.
You got in trouble kind of thing, and so there can be the stigma, but you were starting to think about whether or not you wanted to go home early. About how far into the mission were you when you first started thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty quick. I wasn't out there very long in terms of like my whole mission in comparison to 24 months compared to a full 2-year mission. But I mean, this was weeks after getting out to the mission field. Like 2 or 3 weeks in, I just was really struggling. Like everything that was a problem in the MTC was becoming increasingly more challenging and difficult, and like my mental health was very much so being hit a lot harder at this point. And so I remember telling my companion, like what do I do? Like I had no idea who to reach out to other than my companion. He was like, well, you should probably talk to the mission president. And so we called the mission president, and I had a conversation with him about like, what I was struggling with and what was going on. And he suggested that I have a phone call with parents, or specifically with my mom, because that's what I was struggling with. And so they kind of set it up for me to be able to call my mom and have a conversation with her and everything. And so I remember calling her and her like reassuring me like, hey, I'm okay. Like I'm doing all right. Like you just focus on you down there.
And knowing her, she could really be struggling. To just say, I'm all right.
Yeah.
Just think about yourself. She's very much so is the kind of person that wants to make sure that everybody else is okay and doesn't want people to worry about her, even if she's in a state of like people should worry about her,
Yeah. And so I remember like it kind of helped because it was good to talk to a family member. And so I do remember that like being nice, but it certainly didn't make like any of it go away or anything. It wasn't magically like, okay, now I'm fine. So I went out and, another like week or two goes by and still struggling heavily. And at this point I'm like starting to think like, yeah, like maybe this just is not for me. It's not going to work out. And so told my companion, then had me call the mission president again. And this is like when I explained like, yeah, this like really is not good. It's not working out for me. I'm really struggling because of like some of this other stuff that's going on and is kind of like distracting me. And I'm having a lot of anxiety from it. And I should say like, I had problems with like anxiety and depression in high school, like leading up to this. This wasn't just an out of the blue kind of thing. It just, the mission kind of brought it back and like made it extreme.
Your mom got sick. All of a sudden you are like shipped off into the circumstance you've never been in before. Everything was comfortable, taken care of, probably felt like a fun little like trip, getting to hang out with people. Then all of a sudden it's like hard. You're in another country, you don't know anybody, you could barely talk to your family, your mom is sick, and all of this like anxiety and depression is just like coming like crazy. And you're like, I can't even focus on what the purpose of a mission is and what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, there's basically no reason for me to be here because I can't even focus on any of this stuff. You can tell me if I'm wrong. I'm just kind of trying to.
No, that really does sum it up. And I remember my mission president said that I would need to talk to my stake president back home and like talk to him about the issues and stuff, because stake presidents have a say on like, I guess, when you come home or not.
That's interesting. I would think it's like a mission president thing.
Yeah, and so I guess the idea is maybe that your stake president from your home stake like knows you well and like can know your situation a little better. And he was like, I'm going to set up a call with you and your stake president. Like, it's not going to be immediate right away. Like, they've got to tell your stake president at home, like, hey, when's a good time that you can talk to this missionary?
And there's a time difference.
There's a time difference. Stake presidents are already busy with their job and like everything that's going on there. So I said, okay, like that sounds good. And then probably within that next week sometime, we got a call on our cell phone. Each companionship has a cell phone. And it was my stake president. And so I remember we were on a bus ride at the time going somewhere. And I I remember like kind of breaking down on the phone a little bit to my state president, like on this bus ride. Like, I don't know why I'm struggling as much as I am. I don't know why I can't seem to like shift my focus to just be just fully focused and involved on the work that I need to be doing. And I was just explaining, like, just having like really bad anxiety, like it was affecting, like I wasn't sleeping well, I was not comfortable with the language at all, and just felt like stuff was piling up, and I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. And he said that like he 100% gets it. He said that, you know, a mission is hard no matter where you go. He's like, but when you're transplanted into a new country where you're not familiar with any of the culture or the language, like it can be really, really challenging. He's like, I want you to do this. I want you to promise me that like for 1 week, you're just going to try and work as hard as you can. And I'm going to call you again 1 week from today, and we'll check in and see how you're doing. If you still feel like you want to go home, he's like, we'll get it done. He's like, but I basically want to see, like, if you just give it your best shot at shifting your focus away from everything else and do the work, will that help? He's like, I've had missionaries do this, and, you know, 1 week's difference does it. And they end up staying, and they have a great mission. And so he's like, let's give it a shot. And I was fine with it at this point. I was like, I've been out here for like plenty of time already anyways. Like 1 week isn't going to kill me. So I do remember like really trying with my companion, just like trying to focus on like, let's just get up, do as much work as we can. We knocked a lot of doors. We were really focused on just anything missionary related to keep my mind away from home.
Just spreading the gospel, teaching the word of God.
Yeah.
Teaching how Joseph Smith did all these amazing things. He was the best guy ever.
Exactly. It was all of that.
Teaching the story of the translation and the first vision in ways that it didn't happen. I mean, you thought it happened that way.
I did think it happened. So I remember, well, I should say, I never ended up having another conversation with my state president, because when he hung up the phone with me, I later learned this from him. He said that like something didn't seem right. So he's like, I'm just going to sign the papers and have him come home.
Yeah.
But I didn't find out about that right away. It was days after this, like where we had started like just working, going back to our normal schedule. And then I found out, I think maybe 3 or 4 days later, like, you're going home. Like, and so we'd gotten a call from the mission home, from the mission president, like that arrangements had been made, and that I would need to be ready, like packed and ready to travel back up to the mission home, where they would then take me to the airport. And so it was all like scheduled out and planned out and everything. And I remember feeling kind of like confused, because I was thinking, oh, okay, well, I was supposed to be going another week before any decisions were made. However, I don't want to skip too far ahead. Maybe I'll just finish telling what that looked like, and then I can kind of go into what I want to talk about after that. So I got taken to the mission office. The assistants to the presidents, or APs, they call them. It's just missionaries that work specifically for the mission president. They are the ones that drove me to the airport in Concepcion, and basically made sure I was in the right spot. And then I got on my plane. Then I got off in Santiago, Chile again, which is the big airport that was going to take me from there to Atlanta. And so I'm in this airport where I'm now by myself, because I had flown by myself from the mission to this airport. And it's this like big kind of international airport there, and I had no idea where I was supposed to go. I'm wandering around this airport completely lost, like panicking that I'm going to miss my flight. Luckily, some person that I assume was from America, the way that they were speaking perfect English and everything, was like, they said hi to me. They were like saying, hey, elder, like they realized I was a missionary and was like trying to point me in the right direction. And they helped me find like customs or whatever it is that you have to go through for an international flight. And so that was really nice. That, like, I was having a panic attack because I had no idea where to go. I was lost in this airport.
I have a quick question about this. When you got to your mission and you're done like with airports and flights and all of that, did they take your passport from you?
I think so, because I don't think I had it with me until I went back to the mission home to leave for the airport to come home.
Then they give it back to you. Because that's what I've heard through international missions, that they take your passport so that you can't go home on your own free will.
I think that happened in the MTC too, and I don't know. I've heard that theory about it, like so that you can't leave on your own, but I also think it's because they don't want missionaries to lose their passport, so that by the end of their mission, there's not some big hassle trying to get them back into the country.
Do you think they could just be saying that?
They could just be saying that, but also I wouldn't be surprised if there's been stories in the past where missionaries had their own passport and lost it, and then it was a whole ordeal trying to get them back into the U.S.
What about the whole thing about like carrying little change on you in case you're robbed?
I was told certain things. So I think certain mission areas that you go to are more dangerous than others in that sense. Like you're probably more likely to be robbed in certain missions in certain countries than others. Mm-hmm. I was never really told that was some huge fear or anything. Like,
was there like a handbook? I think I heard that it's in a certain handbook. Missionary.
It might be in the missionary handbook. There's a little white handbook that's like, I don't know, index card sized, that has like all the rules and things you need to know as a missionary.
Mm-hmm. To find it online, we could put some of the stuff up on the screen.
I think you can find it just on the church's website. But
all right, so somebody helped you, and now you like know where you're going.
Okay, so now I know where I'm going. So then I get on this plane. It's a 8 or 9 hour flight overnight to get up to Atlanta, Georgia, to that airport.
That's a long flight.
Yeah, it's a very long flight. And
were you able to sleep?
I wasn't able to sleep. I don't know. I don't have enough experience on airplanes, but I think it might have been a mixture of like just having anxiety about coming home early or whatever it might have been, but I did not sleep.
Do you feel like a part of you was relieved but also anxious about what everyone was going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't been out super long.
How long was it?
I have a hard time putting the timeline together, but I want to say it was like between 3 and 4 months. Like it was a pretty short thing. And so like coming home so soon too, there was like a lot of like, what are they going to think? Is it going to be like, they think that there was something from before my mission that like was never, whatever. So I had a little bit of that, but I also was excited to get back because I felt like I obviously had stuff mental health wise that I need to work on. And
want to hug your parents.
I wanted to be around my family again. So there was a lot of mixed emotions just about the whole situation. But yeah, so then we go into Atlanta. Atlanta's a ginormous airport. So I got off my plane, got my bags, had to take like some tram or something like across the airport to get to the right place to get on my next flight.
You had a flight after your 8 or 9 hour one?
Yeah, so then I had to fly from Atlanta to here, which is like 4 hours and something.
Oh, you've been to Georgia?
Yeah. Airport.
I want to go there. The airport.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I've been to Georgia. Like if somebody asked me, like technically I have, but I just was at the airport the whole time.
Oh, I'll count if I just drove through a state or something because I've been to so little places. For somebody who likes to travel,
yeah,
I'm like, oh yeah, I've been to.
I would tell people I've been to Mexico and I've been to Chile. And
I say that I've been to Oregon, but I really like drove through Oregon to get to Washington because my grandma lives there. Well, lived there. She kicked the can. What's it called? Carry on. Sorry.
Kick the can.
Is that the same?
Kick the bucket. Kick the can is a game.
Oh, that's interesting.
So then I flew from Georgia to Salt Lake, and I remember getting off the plane. My dad was there and some of my younger siblings. My mom wasn't able to be at the airport, and I can't remember why, what was going on at the time.
Because she'd been like getting chemo or something.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what the reason was, but she had a legitimate reason why she couldn't be at the airport when I was getting picked up. And I remember when they picked me up, the first thing we did is we went to Chick-fil-A. And I got Chick-fil-A, and it was delicious.
You love Chick-fil-A to this day.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A is freaking good. So I got some.
I guess Canada just recently got Chick-fil-A, like within the last year.
Dang.
Heck, we get everything so late. What's his name? Will Tennyson or Tennis? Whatever. That's beside the point. I can't talk. Carry on.
I felt good being back. I hadn't officially been released as a missionary yet. So I went home and just like sat there in my suit until that night at like 7 or 7:30 or something. I officially got released. And
oh yeah, so you want to
missionary
explain
anymore.
that for a minute? Because some people, I think that was news to me when I heard that even though you're not in the mission anymore,
Yeah.
or even if once you get your calling, right, they set you apart, and even before you leave, you have to be following all the mission rules.
Yeah, and some people I will say care more than others. Like
Yeah.
some people, like when I've heard stories about missionaries watching movies on the airplane on the way home because they're done with their mission essentially,
Mhm.
even though they're not released yet.
Yeah, where
Which
other
would-
people are more
Which
like,
would be against the rules, but
no.
other people would be like, no, I'm not doing anything until I'm released. I'm still a missionary, whatever.
Whatever, the way he said that.
Which is kind of what I was doing, to be fair. Like, I got home and I just kind of sat around and hung out with family and stuff until I was able to go. And then once I got released officially as a missionary by my state president, then I was able to like change out of my suit and I was back to normal life, basically.
Yeah. Okay, so after you got home, within like a certain amount of time after getting home, you found out some like hard news in your family. You want to talk about some of that?
Yeah, so I'd already been dealing with the anxiety and stuff from my mom's situation while I was out. And having been home and around her and stuff, I was like starting to feel like a little bit better about that. Just being there and being around her, I think was helping a lot. And then I couldn't tell you the exact time, but this is like within a couple months of me getting back. It might have even been weeks. My dad had started being dizzy a lot. So he was like noticing like these uncomfortable like headaches, and he was really dizzy. And like the most famous story about that whole situation was him playing basketball with me and my brothers in our backyard, and him with his dizziness trying to shoot a basket and him missing by like 5 or more feet to each side, like trying to shoot. And so we're sitting there laughing our heads off because he's normally a good shooter, and now he's like not anywhere close. He's just airballing everything by a mile. And so we were realizing like, yeah, he is pretty freaking dizzy. And he had gone to like physical therapists to do stuff to like treat him for what he thought was vertigo, I think. And by the time he'd gone in, like the 4th time, they were like, yeah, you just need to go to the hospital. Like that, we've done our treatment. It doesn't seem to be helping. Like, so he goes to I think he just went to the ER originally and then ended up like getting admitted and whatnot, because they found out that he had a tumor on his brain, and that's what was causing the dizziness. And there's a whole thing because, mind you, he had been like driving to work and stuff during this, during all of this. So
That sounds like you. I feel like you will fight through like weird things that happen and not go to the doctor, and you're just like, I'm fine.
yeah, so that was crazy. I remember going to the hospital because me and my brother were gonna meet him there to give him a blessing, and I parked in the emergency services parking lot on accident, where like the life flight pilots park and the ambulance people park on accident. Didn't realize. So that's like a funny story that people make fun of me of in our family.
Did you get in trouble or something?
I didn't, but when we walked out and my brother was parked somewhere completely different and he realized where I was parked, it was brought up. But yeah, so that was like really like crazy news.
No, both your parents have cancer.
Yeah. And at this time, we didn't actually know if this was cancerous. Like,
Okay.
they basically said that there's a tumor, like a growth back here on his brain that is likely the cause of the headaches and the dizziness and everything. And so gave him a blessing there. And then we left, and we were waiting because they had to do a surgery to like basically take part of it and whatever it's called, like pathology or wherever they test to see if it's cancerous. Well, we did find out that it was cancer, and it was cancer that had spread from his lungs. He had a certain type of lung cancer. It had spread to his brain. And anyways, so that was really challenging, and that was just like a really scary thing because
He never smoked or anything.
yeah, he wasn't a smoker. I mean, he was relatively healthy up to that point. I mean, and so that was scary, like now having two parents that have some form of cancer. And I remember going to church once we had found out about my dad. I was by myself that week for some reason at church in our home ward. And our stake president was visiting our ward that Sunday. And I remember like just sitting in the chapel after sacrament meeting had ended. I was just like sitting on the bench. I think I was maybe going to just leave after just sacrament meeting because I was the only one there. And I think maybe I was just planning on going home after that. But the stake president came and found me and sat by me at the end of the meeting. And he was talking to me about the whole thing with me coming home. Because you remember, I was having conversations about him, about whether or not I should come home from my mission. And he said, he kind of gave me the actual story behind the scenes of why I didn't actually end up staying for a full week longer in the mission. And it was because he said that when he hung up the phone call with me, he was like, I just had a really like bad feeling in the pit of my stomach that like, no, he needs to come home now. And it was after we had already hung up and disconnected the call. So he like immediately called the mission president back after that and like started scheduling things. And so
like this intuitive thing almost because, or what like active members would say is, you know, the spirit was telling them. And it was just kind of interesting how you got back, and then the biggest struggle was because of your mom's health and stuff, and then your dad gets this as soon as you come back, which you would have still been on your mission when you got diagnosed if you stayed out. And truthfully, like I had already had a few experiences. You talked earlier about the stigma of missionaries coming home early. I'd already had a few members in the ward like make comments about like, oh, when are you going back out? Like when you, like them meaning well, but very clearly not understanding like the seriousness of the situation or really understanding why I was home in the first place. Like they might have thought that it was something that I was needing help with or doing. They might not have thought that it was related to my mom being sick because I already knew about that before I left. But anyways, when the mission president or the stake president sat down with me and said this, he was like, so I had a really bad feeling about it. I called him right back. He's like, and then when I found out about your dad, I was like, oh, maybe this was like why I felt that way as opposed to how I normally have everybody stay a week. And so like that was really like vindicating for me because I was like, yeah, like maybe there's a reason why I'm actually supposed to be home right now. That's, you know, a different reason than just my mental health like I had thought. So that was really helpful. And I still to this day appreciate that stake president very, very much. And yeah, so I mean, then I'm at a point where I'm kind of like dealing with just a lot of pressure from like the membership of the church about this kind of like need to go back. And like even my companion when I left Chile was saying like, try to not get too comfortable at home. Like he's like, you'll want to come back out here and finish your mission and everything. And you weren't feeling that at all.
I was not feeling that. I was like telling him like, yeah, I was open to it and everything, but I was not feeling that because it was such a like painful like thing that I was going through. And so I get where they were coming from, but then like you start hearing that same stuff being reiterated by members and you're like mentally in a position where you're like, yeah, my only focus right now is like trying to figure out life that's happening here.
Yeah, your parents are seemingly actively dying, and really they should be encouraging you to stay and be with your family. That's for a church that really likes to talk about how important family is. That should be the number one priority in this situation.
Yeah, and that's how I felt the whole time. I mean, I eventually got to a point where like comments from other members didn't really affect me or bother me at all. I was able to just like comfortably tell them like, it's just not a focus of mine right now going back out. Like there's obviously stuff going on with my parents and I'd rather just be here, being helpful any way that I can here.
Yeah.
I got used to comments from people that were overstepping, that they meant well. They were friends of mine from the ward. But I got to a point where I didn't care, and really my only focus was I'm just happy to be back home, trying to get my mental health under control. I had a doctor at that point. I'd been put on like some anti-anxiety meds, and so I was just focused on taking care of me and helping take care of family in any way that I could while I was there.
How long after this did things progress to a point where like everybody knew your dad was like close to going? How long did that take?
I would say it took a while, but that's all perspective. I mean, he was diagnosed
Like 2014,
spring sometime of 2014, because I had left for my mission in 2014. So it's kind of like a spring time, maybe March, April, something like that. My mom would know the exact dates, but he didn't pass away until 2015 in May. It was May 1st, 2015.
Just still like a
So
year.
it was about a year, a little more than a year, I think, from the time he was diagnosed until he passed away. But
that was fast, like compared to my mom. My mom
Yeah,
had
I mean-
4 years from when she was diagnosed, and then
yeah, I mean, I remember reading stuff about his specific type of cancer, and like, at that point, after he'd been diagnosed, I was just curious myself, and had started researching like statistics of like how long people live with that type of cancer. And there was a lot of stuff saying that like the typical prognosis would be like 3 or 4 months diagnosed at that stage. And so I felt in a lot of ways lucky that I was home and had the chance to be around him for a good amount of time.
yeah.
Um,
And so how do you, now that, we've deconstructed, religion and we're where we're at now and
mhm.
are, atheists, which still feels like such a weird word for me to say because the stigma of like what that meant growing up was so horrible. So it like makes me feel like it's this horrible thing, even though I know it's not. Anyway, being here now and looking back on your mission and your whole experience, how do you see it now? Is there anything that you would do differently at this point? Yeah, just what do you think about it now?
Yeah, I mean, this surprisingly, maybe because of like the difficulty of the experience, I largely look at my mission experience, even though it was short and there was a lot going on, as a positive. The people that I met, I still have some of those friendships very strong to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Especially my companion from the MTC, him and I talk regularly. We've gone to concerts and things since. And so,
is that the one you went to a Killers concert with in Vegas when we first started dating? Okay.
yeah. And so like the people that I met, like those relationships have largely been positive, and I'm very grateful for them, and they wouldn't have happened any other way without the mission. So I think the mission teaches you a lot about just work ethic and staying focused on things.
Doing something hard you don't want to do.
Doing something that's difficult. Like it sometimes doesn't seem like you want to go knock on a bunch of people's doors and tell them about what you believe in, but so it and they're full long work days. So I mean, and you get that from starting in the MTC. You're waking up at 6 and
you have to be in bed by 10, right?
Going to bed by 10, and then your whole entire day is filled with classes or so you learn like important skills about time management and working hard. And so I'm grateful for those things as well. The only like thing that I would say is that I think people need to take a bigger consideration about like their mental health and where that's at before they go, because I fortunately came out of it still having like a very positive like experience with it, and I've been able to like overcome and like grow from the things that happened. But I could see that causing a lot more pain and heartache to other people, and I'm sure that it has. But all in all, I'm grateful for the experience. And now with my religious beliefs or non-belief in this sense, I don't have any sort of, I know some people will talk about like having guilt that they were teaching people things that they no longer think are true. I don't really have that, because I, at the time, fully believed it. And me regretting having taught them that, like, there's nothing I can do about it at this point. Like this, I fully believed at the time. I was being sincere at the time.
I feel like that's kind of what we're doing now. Maybe more me than you on this channel, where I talk a lot about what my current beliefs are and not believing in God and stuff like that. Whereas like one day, 10 years down the line, maybe I have a belief in God again.
Yeah.
I would hope that I wouldn't necessarily regret like spreading information, because I'm not over here like God's not real, and I'm just like these are the experiences I've had. This is how I've felt, and I just want to share my feelings about this stuff, and I'm not necessarily trying to.
Yeah, it's more been like
It's more been.
It's been more like, I don't know. But it's just losing faith in this church or this set of beliefs, and not knowing what is or isn't real, and not like wanting to latch on to some other, because a lot of people will leave and then they just, they go to some other Christian church or denomination
community and stuff. Yeah.
I'm not against doing that by any means or whatever. Like if I come to be convinced that some other religious claim is true, then that's probably where I'll be. But
yeah, and I'm sure there's some people in religions too that don't necessarily know if whatever they're going to or practicing is real, but they just enjoy the community or just feel good there. And I think that applies to a lot of people in the Mormon church too. Or I don't necessarily think that that's the majority, but I think there's plenty of people who likely are there because it's what they know and they're comfortable and their friends and family are there, but maybe a lot of the doctrinal teachings are not necessarily ingrained in them as truth, but or maybe they just don't know. Is there anything else you want to add before we close this video? Any encouragement for people who are watching this about to leave on their missions?
Don't do it. Just kidding. No, I think that covers it. And
read the CES letter before you go, and if you still believe, then go ahead.
Then go ahead. No, I think it covered it pretty well. If people have questions, they can just leave a comment and I'll check it out and look at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, all in all, I would say positive experience with my mission. It was something that was really challenging though at the same time, and that's why it was cut short, but I'm happy to talk more about it if people have questions about it. But
yeah. Well, thanks so much for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please make sure that you hit that button and hit the bell so that you're notified every time I upload. And
and if you hated it, also click the like button.
Sure. Just don't dislike it if you don't like it. You could just leave. Okay, bye.